Staying in Longview, where a jury found Jose Rodriguez Jr. guilty today of capital murder. This is for shooting and killing two brothers in Longview. Rodriguez will now spend the rest of his life in prison without the possibility of parole. KLTV7's Emma Burns was there when that verdict was read.
After several hours of deliberation, a Gregg County jury has delivered its decision. Jose Rodriguez Jr. has been found guilty of capital murder in the deaths of Alexi and Alexander Gomez.
Is what a normal, reasonable, ordinary person do what Jose Rodriguez did that night?
That was the question prosecutor Clayton Haas left jurors with during his closing arguments, arguing the killings were not done in self-defense, but a cold and calculated choice. Rodriguez was charged with opening fire on the two brothers during a late-night altercation in 2023. But his defense attorney, Gerald Smith, attempted to tell a different story.
If you threaten someone with a gun, our laws are that you can defend yourself, you can defend others with the same type of force. That's what this case is about.
The defense maintained Rodriguez fired in self-defense, claiming the Gomez brothers were the ones who pulled guns first. But prosecutors argued there was no credible threat and that Rodriguez's intent was to kill. The Gomez family sat through every moment of testimony, quietly holding hands as a verdict was read.
The verdict of the jury, we the jury find the defendant, Jose Daniel Rodriguez Jr., guilty of capital murder as charged in the indictment.
As the Gomez family heard Rodriguez's fate, they let out cries of relief, knowing that justice was delivered. Emma Burns, KLTV7 News.
And that jury deliberated, give or take, about 4 hours today. That verdict came with an automatic life sentence without the possibility of parole.